When you hear the word narcissist, what image comes to mind? Probably someone loud, arrogant, obsessed with their appearance. The CEO who plasters their office with awards. The Instagram influencer posing in front of mirrors. The classic movie villain who can't stop talking about how amazing they are. But what if I told you that's just one face of narcissism, and often not even the most dangerous one? The truth is, narcissism wears many masks. Some are obvious. Others are so subtle, so carefully disguised, that you might spend years with a narcissist and never quite name what you're experiencing. You just know something feels wrong, draining, confusing, subtly cruel. Today we're exploring 8 distinct types of narcissism, 8 different ways the same core wound manifests, 8 faces that look nothing alike on the surface but share the same hollow center. If you've ever felt like you're going crazy around someone but couldn't explain why, if you've been drained by people who seem loving on the surface, or if you're tired of being manipulated by those who claim they're the real victims, this video is for you. Make sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss our deep dives into the psychology of manipulation and healing. By the end of this video, you'll be able to recognize narcissism in forms you never expected. In the martyr who guilt-trips you with their sacrifices, in the spiritual guru who uses enlightenment as a weapon, in the eternal victim whose suffering always trumps yours. Let's begin with the one everyone knows. Type 1. The king or queen. On the surface, this is the classic, grandiose narcissist everyone recognizes. They need no introduction because they've already introduced themselves at length. They dominate every room, expecting recognition, obedience, and constant acknowledgement of their superiority. You find them everywhere. The parent who treats the dinner table like a throne room, the boss who destroys careers over minor slights, the partner who requires constant praise but offers none in return, the friend who always has to be the most successful, the most impressive, the center of every story. But here's how they actually operate. They don't just want respect, they require worship. Everyone in their orbit exists as either an audience or a servant. Disagree with them? Challenge them? Punishment is swift, rage, humiliation, or cold exclusion. So what drives this behavior? At the core is a terror of ordinariness. The grandiosity isn't confidence. It's a brittle defense against an unbearable fear that underneath the crown, there's no one home. From an archetypal perspective, this is the shadow king or queen, the corrupted sovereign. Authority without responsibility. All take, no give. But if this type is so obvious, why do people stay? Hold that thought, because the next type will show you exactly how narcissism can look like love. Type 2. The martyr. On the surface, this type couldn't look more different. They seem selfless, sacrificing, devoted. I've given up everything for you. They are the ultimate tireless caregiver, whether as a parent, partner, friend, or even boss. But look closer at how they operate. Every act of care comes with invisible strings. Every sacrifice is recorded in a ledger you will be billed for later. They create enmeshment, making your life an extension of theirs. As a parent, they guilt trip. After everything I've sacrificed, this is how you repay me. As a partner, they smother. I've devoted my entire life to you, and you want space. As a friend, they manipulate. I'm always there for you, but when I need you. As a boss, they exploit. I've given you every opportunity here. You owe me your loyalty. Try to set any boundary, and the response is always the same. You're ungrateful, selfish, abandoning someone who gave you everything. The care is conditional on your remaining theirs. What lies at the core? Without someone to merge with and control through caretaking, they have no sense of self. Your independence is existentially threatening. You separating feels like they're dying. Archetypally, this is the devouring mother or father. But this energy isn't limited to literal parents. It's the caretaker archetype corrupted. Love, as imprisonment, the container that refuses to open. The king demands worship, the martyr demands gratitude. But what about the type that doesn't demand anything at all? They just quietly drain everything you have. Let me introduce you to the most subtle predator. Type 3, the energy vampire. You know this person by how you feel around them. Exhausted. A quick conversation leaves you drained for the rest of the day. On the surface, they aren't mean. They're just depleting. They could be anyone. The friend whose coffee meetings somehow always stretch to 3 hours of emotional marathons. The colleague who constantly needs just a quick word that becomes an emotional download. The family member whose phone calls leave you needing a nap. The romantic partner who seems fascinated by you but never quite sees you. Here's how they operate. These narcissists excel at extraction. They identify what's vital in you, your energy, joy, attention, and pull it toward themselves like a black hole pulls light. Your good news becomes about them. Your crisis gets one-upped by their bigger crisis. You are used as a resource. At their core, they have no internal source of vitality, just an aching void that must be filled constantly from the outside. They are psychologically parasitic. The archetypal image here is the vampire, the undead who cannot create life, only consume it from the living. Beautiful, magnetic, and fundamentally empty. At least with the vampire, you know you're being drained. But what happens when someone makes you question whether your energy, your reality, your sanity even exists? Stay with me. Type 4, the game master. On the surface, nothing is ever quite real with this person. Facts shift. Conversations feel slippery. They say one thing yesterday and contradict it today, insisting you're the confused one. You might encounter them as a romantic partner who rewrites history constantly. A boss who denies saying things you clearly remember. A parent who insists your childhood memories are wrong. A friend who plays people against each other for sport. Watch how they operate. Gaslighting is their native language. They don't just deceive, they create alternate versions of events to keep you destabilized. They enjoy the chaos, watching with a small smirk when they've successfully confused someone. The goal is keeping you off balance, unable to trust your own mind. What's at their core? A deep terror of genuine connection. If they can keep reality fluid and control the narrative, they never have to risk being truly seen or known. This is the shadow trickster archetype. Chaos as a weapon, not a catalyst. Disruption for domination. The game master makes you doubt reality. But there's another type who stays perpetually outside reality altogether, living in a fantasy of eternal potential that never has to face the real world. Sound familiar? Type 5, the eternal child. On the surface, they're charming, spontaneous, brimming with ideas. They have eternal potential. But spend enough time with them and you notice the potential never becomes actual. The promises never materialize. And somehow, it's never their fault. They're the romantic partner who can never quite commit. The friend who borrows money but never pays it back because they're between opportunities. The colleague who has brilliant ideas but never does the actual work. The adult child who still expects their parents to solve all their problems. Here's how they operate. Rules and responsibilities are for ordinary people. They're always about to do something amazing, once conditions are perfect. When reality intrudes or they're held accountable, the tantrum comes. Sometimes it's loud. More often it's passive-aggressive, sulking, silent treatment, sudden coldness. They are hypersensitive to criticism because it implies they're not already perfect. At their core is a terror of actual adulthood. Growing up means accepting limitations and ordinariness. Better to remain the child forever, promising everything, delivering nothing, never risking self-definition. This is the puer aeternus or puella aeterna, the eternal boy or girl, potential frozen in place, development arrested. The eternal child refuses to be pinned down by reality. But the next type, they've perfected reality, at least on the surface. They've built an image so flawless, you might miss the emptiness underneath. Type 6, the Golden One. On the surface, everything about them is polished, strikingly beautiful, meticulously groomed, curated social media. They must be center stage, the star, the main character in every story. They're the Instagram influencer whose entire identity is their image. The fitness fanatic whose self-worth lives and dies by the mirror. The colleague who treats every meeting like a runway. The partner who needs constant validation about their appearance. The friend who can't have a conversation without steering it back to their accomplishments, their body, their conquest of the week. Watch how they operate. Their body is both temple and weapon. Sex is conquest. They need to be the focus of every gaze. Silence feels like suffocation. Watch them at a party where they're not the star, the discomfort, and the subtle bids to reclaim the spotlight. Everyone else's background in their personal movie. What's at the core? The terror is aging, invisibility, ordinariness. Their identity is completely fused with their image, and the image's inevitable decline feels like annihilation. Archetypally, this is the golden god or goddess, the divine in the physical corrupted into totality. When the physical fades, nothing remains. The Golden One worships at the altar of image. But what about those who claim to have transcended image, transcended ego, transcended you entirely? The next type is perhaps the most dangerous of all because they weaponize wisdom itself. Type 7, the Enlightened One. On the surface, they are so wise, so spiritually advanced, so intellectually sophisticated. They've studied longer, meditated deeper, and understood more profoundly than you ever will. They're the yoga teacher who uses spiritual bypassing to avoid accountability. The therapist who subtly positions themselves as more evolved than their clients. The professor who makes you feel stupid for asking questions. The self-help guru who sells enlightenment but lives in ego. The colleague who uses corporate jargon and complexity to maintain superiority. The friend who's read more books, taken more courses, achieved more awareness, and wants you to know it. Here's how they operate. Every interaction is a teaching opportunity where they are the teacher. Questions are met with gentle condescension. You're still operating from ego, or that's a very surface-level understanding. They use enlightenment language to avoid accountability. I've transcended judgment means don't criticize me. They gather followers who are simultaneously elevated and diminished. Beneath the performance of wisdom is profound fear of being ordinary. The guru mask protects them from confronting their own uncertainty and pain. This is the false prophet archetype. Wisdom weaponized. The teacher who enslaves through claims of superior understanding. The Enlightened One claims to be above suffering, but there's one final type who makes suffering their entire identity and uses it to control everyone around them. This is the most deceptive mask of all. Type 8, the professional victim. On the surface, they've suffered. Oh, have they suffered? More than you, more than anyone. They collect wounds like merit badges and want you to know about their exceptional burden. They're the friend whose trauma always overshadows yours, the family member who guilt trips through their pain, the colleague who uses past hardships to avoid current responsibilities, the partner who weaponizes their mental health diagnoses, the ex who makes you responsible for their well-being long after the relationship ends. Look at how they operate. This type seems vulnerable and genuinely damaged, but the wound has become their currency, identity, and weapon. Their suffering justifies everything. Bad behavior? You can't expect me to function normally. Try to suggest healing or change. You're invalidating my pain. The wound ensures they remain the center of attention and concern. Here's what's at the core. The pain is real, but healing would mean releasing the identity they've built around being wounded. Letting go of the pain feels like disappearing. This is the wounded healer's shadow, suffering not as transformation, but as permanent identity and weapon. Now you've seen all 8 faces, the king and the martyr, the vampire and the game master. the eternal child and the golden one, the enlightened prophet and the professional victim. They look completely different on the surface, but here's what will change everything you thought you knew. These 8 types are the same core wound wearing different costumes. They all share 4 fundamental features. First, they all have a frozen self, development arrested at a critical point, the natural flow towards psychological wholeness blocked. Second, they all have an insatiable hunger. Because there's no stable internal core, they must constantly extract from outside admiration, attention, energy, control. Third, they all have a terror of authenticity. The real self feels so inadequate, so fragile, so ordinary that it must remain hidden at all costs behind these masks. And fourth, they all lack the ability to truly see others. People exist as objects, mirrors, extensions, or sources of supply, never as separate subjects with their own reality. Now you might be wondering, why do these 8 types look so radically different if they're the same wound underneath? Because narcissism forms in childhood as a defense against unbearable pain, abandonment, neglect, overwhelming expectations, trauma. The specific mask depends on what worked in that particular environment, what was modeled, what got the child the care or attention they desperately needed. The child who learned that grandiosity got attention becomes the king. The child who learned that suffering secured care becomes the victim. The child who learned that being needed created connection becomes the martyr. The child who learned that image equaled love becomes the golden one. Different adaptations to the same underlying crisis, a self that couldn't properly form, a wholeness that couldn't develop, a person who got stuck before they became fully real. But here's the question that matters most. Why should you care about understanding these distinctions? What difference does it make in your actual life? Because the answer to this could save you years of confusion and pain. Understanding these faces matters because the subtle types, the martyr, the victim, the enlightened one, are often far more damaging than the obvious king or queen. They're harder to leave, harder to name, harder to recognize even as they hollow you out from the inside. They don't look like narcissists. They look like devoted parents, wounded souls, spiritual guides. You find yourself making excuses for them, questioning whether you're being unfair, wondering if maybe you're the problem. That confusion is precisely the point. The subtle masks are designed to keep you trapped in doubt. Learning to see the pattern beneath the mask gives you clarity. And clarity, when dealing with narcissism, is everything. Have you experienced this? That nagging feeling that something's wrong, but you can't quite name it? Drop a comment below and tell me which type you've encountered. Your story might help someone else finally see what they've been dealing with. Narcissism is one wound wearing 8 convincing masks. The loud mask and the quiet mask, the holy mask and the wounded mask, the beautiful mask and the wise mask. But underneath every mask is the same hollow space, the same arrested development, the same hunger that can never be filled, the same inability to truly see or love another person. Once you know what to look for, not just the obvious grandiosity, but the subtle extraction, the covert control, the weaponized vulnerability, you can't unsee it. And that's when you get to choose: stay and be slowly drained, or name what you see and walk away. The masks are convincing, but you don't have to be convinced anymore. You know the 8 faces now. You know what they hide, you know the pattern, and knowing the pattern sets you free. Before you go, subscribe to this channel if you're ready to dive deeper into the psychology of manipulation, healing, and reclaiming your power. We're building a community of people who refuse to be gaslit, drained, or controlled anymore. Share this video with someone who's still trying to figure out why they feel crazy around certain people. Sometimes naming the pattern is the first step toward freedom. I'll see you in a next video where we'll talk about exactly how to protect yourself from these types and start healing from narcissistic abuse. Until then, trust your gut, trust your perception, and remember, you're not crazy. You're just finally seeing clearly.